This is Mike Durr. Hey, how you guys doing today? Mike Durr here with Joe Salas of,
Hello.
of Jane Byrd Properties International, and Purple Paint
There you
Inspections.
go.
How did I do? Well, that wasn't the best one I've ever done.
No, it's great. It's great. You got it right.
Uh, anyway, we're here. We got some interesting information. I've been studying a little bit, trying to find some information that I thought would make sense for people that are out there, possibly in the real estate buying or selling mandate. And let me turn my phone off here so get this thing corrected real quick. And so, Joe, tell us what you've been doing this week.
Oh man, I got a closing. Trying to coordinate. You know, it's funny. You've heard of mobile notaries, right?
Yeah.
So I have a client that she works. She works with cruise lines. She does cruises, and she performs some sort of function on there. So she's gone and she's selling a house, and so we're trying to match the day that she is at port to the day that mortgage and title have all the documents ready to the day that the mobile notary is gonna. It's been crazy, but we're making it happen. Other than that, just staying busy. I've been living in commercial world today, like we were talking about a little bit ago.
Well, cool. Yeah, that's always stuff going on. I have an interesting deal that's cooking right now, and I don't remember ever in the. I guess this is my 25th year, well into the 25th year. Uh, I'm not even sure I'm willing to talk about it, but it's based around a communication failure that revolved around whether a property or a contract was contingent or not.
Mm.
And it's created a little bit of strife because the property that sold, I don't know if I shared this with you last week, or the property, no, I didn't because it was supposed to close on Wednesday. The property that the buyer sold closed without funds. In other words, it was a cash offer and the funds didn't show up. And it's created a heck of a lot of turmoil. And I would not recommend that happening to anybody. I mean, it's been a mess and a little bit of lack of communication is something I've learned from. And I think everybody that's involved in this little deal has learned from. So if a property is in a contingent on the person selling their existing property, where on the contract does that show up?
Uh, Paragraph 22. There's a checkbox that says you're adding an addendum for property for sale by buyer, and then it's an addendum that's attached to the contract.
You are exactly right. And I'm guessing that in many cases that gets overlooked.
It
And,
can, it
and
can, but as a buyer's agent, I want to make sure that it's there for sure.
yeah, well, that's right, particularly as the buyer's agent. So anyway, it's a interesting deal, and there have been it's still ongoing, and the person
Oh
that's selling
wow.
the house is not happy, and just all kinds of crazy enough. But it's maybe that's over a couple beers. It's not uh, due for this little group here. But I will share with you. I always look for information to put on that I think will be helpful. I ran across, you know, and pretty much everybody that knows me knows I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, and I found an article that he did recently, and it's basically his version. And again, this is all Dave Ramsey. Very little bit of Mike Durr about what he thinks about the market right now. And we're going to talk about the housing prices and the price increases, supply and demand, housing shortage and how does housing starts, lumber shortage, high demand, frozen foreclosures, investor buyers, the great migration, my favorite slide in this whole thing, the great migration. If you're with us now, stay for that one. And then interest rates is kind of at the butt end of that.
Ooh, I want to talk about interest rates.
Yeah, yeah. But I had to interject some humor, and I had my assistant come with me to decipher my humor, and it's not good that this won because it's not that funny, but I thought it was interesting. It says, remember the time before political correctness when we played livestock management technicians and indigenous peoples. You're not laughing, Joe. What
I'm chuckling.
and that is the world we live in today. Oh my God. All right, so this again, I'm going to give full credit to Dave Ramsey for this. He is the man. I am a fan, and I do want to share it because I think it's worthy. And if any of you guys don't know who Dave Ramsey is, you can go listen to him. He's on the radio pretty much every day in just about every market in the United States. He's a debt Nazi. That's not said with any malintent. It's he hates debt. He thinks everybody should be completely out of debt, and I kind of believe him too, except for your house, and that's the only place where we disagree. Because if everybody had to be out of debt to buy a house, there'd be nobody buying houses. Is what I'm thinking. But that's a good path to go, and anybody that hadn't studied Dave Ramsey should study him. He's not only a very smart guy, he's a Christian guy, and he knows what he's talking about, and he backs it up. So that's about Dave Ramsey. Now let's just talk a little bit about what he had to say about the housing market. Well, you can see right there, he says the housing market is not crashing. And some people would disagree with that. There's been a little softness this last week, and Joe and I kind of study it week to week. Joe, do you have any anecdotal evidence that the market might be crashing?
No, not anything that I've seen. You know, $1 million homes are selling. $150,000 homes, if you can find them, they'll sell.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's still moving. You know, just as always, you know, the rules of real estate, right? The first rule is location, location, location. And the second and third rule, in my opinion, it's pricing and conditions. So as long as those three kind of match up to the buyer's criteria, you're going to sell it.
Yeah.
You're going to sell it.
I believe that's the case too. And I think the message that he had is, one, it's a correct message, but it also will, see, I think what's happening, and a lot of people are afraid to do anything in real estate because they're just not sure what's going to happen. And what Dave Ramsey has said in this presentation, and I'm going to repeat it, as all I'm going to do is I'm just kind of hanging on to Dave Ramsey's coattails. But I believe this same thing, and I think it's consistent with what we've said every time that we've been on this show. And so he brought up some additional information that I thought was kind of interesting. But housing price increases. So there's a little bit of information here. Housing price increased by 29% in 2020, 18% in 2019. I don't have the 2021 numbers, but it's probably in the teens, if not 20%. And in 2022, it's going to be probably in the 8% range, I think is what the experts say. In 2023, the projection is, and this is a projection, is that it's going to be somewhere in the 3 to 4%. Now, the reason I'm showing this particular chart is this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is 1978 here. So when I put my thing over there, 1978, and you see the increase is steady and consistent. There was a little bit of drop. This was in the 2006, 7, and 8 period. This is when the mortgage industry just went straight to not a good place. And then since that time, it's gone up aggressively. Now these are medium home prices, and then really straight up this last period. Now what he's saying we're gonna see is we're gonna see it moving to the right still and still up. It's just gonna level out a little bit. And that's okay, because there was a time, this is probably a 3 to 4 or 5% growth curve right here. This is probably unsustainable. We don't think it's going to fall back, but we do think it's going to go this way. Now, why would I think that? Any ideas, Joe?
Well, you know, they're forecasting, you know, those moderate increases in the appreciation of the homes or the values of the homes. you would see that moderate increase a long time to the right of 2022.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing that he talks about is the housing shortage. And there is no doubt there is a housing shortage. And he makes a point that let's see if I can get this right. Uh, let's see. We've had a shortage of homes since about 2008. And what he's saying is that, let's see, in housing starts and supply was about 1.38 million, 35% lower than the 2.7 million housing starts that happened in 2005. So what's happened is builders have kind of fallen off their production levels and over the course of the last, gosh, well, I guess that would almost be 14, 15 years. And so there's not as many houses being built since then. So that's one component of it. The other component of it is that there are something to the tune of 12 million more people in the market for houses today because of the millennials. And the X generation, I guess, and I don't know if I'll get this exactly right, but the X generation was the group that was buying houses maybe 10 years ago. And now the millennials have come into that young 30-year-old age, which seems to be the prime time when people are buying houses. And there's a lot of them. There are a lot of them that were born in, I guess that would be the 90s, 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, I think so.
there are more of them than we have houses to put them in. So what happens is because of the supply and demand, the cost, when you have a oversupply house or anything, price goes down. When you have more demand than you have supply, the price goes up. And right now we're in one of those positions where it may take 3, 4, 5, even 6 years before we have enough houses to supply for the people that want them. And this would be the same thing. Do you remember when we had the toilet paper shortage?
Yeah.
Remember? And people were selling rolls of toilet paper for way more than what it should cost. And it was kind of a scandal. It's the same thing right now as going on in the oil market, where right now the price of gas has gone up because there's some perception that there's a shortage of it because of the issues in the Ukraine and Russia and all that kind of stuff. So that is something that you can hang your hat on. As long as there are too few houses and too many buyers, then you're going to have a continual increase in the property cost. The couple mitigating factors are if I'm going to do this right, let's see, the median home price. So this says couples credit. It doesn't have anything to do with these median home prices. But there's the inventory. This shows that there were 3.78 million homes for sale. This is back in 2007, 2006. And today, there's less than 1 million homes that are for sale in the United States. That's pretty crazy. And of course, we have not only the same number of people that are buying them, we actually have about 12 million more people that are wanting to buy houses at this time. That's why you had this craziness where you had multiple offers. You had people asking or getting much more than what they put the house up for sale. And like Joe said, if it's in the right location, if it's what were the other two? That was the condition and what was the
price.
And price, yeah. So if it's anything like a good cost, or the prices seems to be in the market, you'll have a lot of people making offers on that property.
Yeah, and I want to remind, because there may be some potential sellers out there watching this show today, I want to remind sellers that even though we are seeing these trends nationally, real estate is hyper local. So when you hire a real estate professional, that is their job for you, is to tell you and analyze the hyper local activity and market in the area that you're selling. Because just because we say national trends is there's an inventory shortage, we may be in an area or a neighborhood where there's an excess or many homes that are being sold or selling actively on the market, and that will affect your pricing strategy as well as your marketing strategy on the home that you want to sell.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's very local. There's something in towards the back here that addresses that to a degree. The other thing that happened though is we had a lumber shortage. You guys remember that? That there was a shortage of lumber. It seems like it's come back online and prices seem to be stabilizing now. But for a good while, uh, builders had trouble getting lumber, and if they got it, it cost a lot more. And particularly if you're in the new home market, you found this because we had uh, stories about builders changing the price after they'd sold a home and started to build it, and then they found out that they had to buy more expensive lumber. It was not a pretty situation. So this is the chart. I already talked about that one. I didn't even show it. There's the one about lumber prices, how they've gone up, but they've come down. So that's a good thing. This is kind of an interesting one also, is that the U.S. has frozen the foreclosures. The government has really put a moratorium on whether you could foreclose on a house. And so the number of people that are buying foreclosures these days has been pretty much gone down to zero. If you look at this chart, and the chart is on my print, it's kind of screwed up, but this chart goes from 2017 to 2022, and you can see just now, this little right here at the bottom right of this chart, you can see that foreclosures are starting to be sold. They basically went from, gosh, a substantial part of the market, almost up to 600,000, down to zero, and now they're just starting to come out of that stage of moratorium, and that foreclosures will be eligible. Now, don't get too excited about that, because you're going to be competing with some of the buyers that are investors. And this talks about the ages. In 2008, the X generation were in their 30s, and now we're in 2022, and it's the millennials, and there's more of them than there were in the X generation. You can see this, and that is based on DL2 there. So interesting stuff. More people, less houses. This is the number of households. What does that say? 128 million in 2020. And back in 2008, there were 116 million. So that's 12 million different. 12 million more households in the United States. That's kind of interesting. Now, this is the part about who's buying those foreclosures and who's buying houses. This is about the investors that are going out there and buying whole communities. Didn't somebody do that in this community?
Yeah. There was I think it was, don't quote me, a Japanese firm that came in and bought a whole new Lennar community just recently.
I heard that. And they didn't buy it for people to buy it from them to hold,
No, they bought it to lease.
They bought it to lease or rent out. Now, what they did, this chart shows the top cities that they're doing this in. And you notice that there's not a Texas town on there. I guess that's a good thing. The bottom 7 looks like Chicago, Virginia Beach, Minnesota, Portland, Seattle, Washington, and Providence. Now, do any of those bottom 7, what can you tell me what's going on in those cities? Does anybody have a kind of a general idea? What do you think, Joe?
Probably the cost of housing is crazy. I can tell you that in Seattle and Washington, D.C., that would probably be the case.
Also, this is where a lot of the riots have been, a lot of the unrest and the people that are raising all kinds of Cain there. And I think that this other chart, I looked at this a lot of Florida, a lot of Sun Coast, of course, Miami's on there, Orlando's on there, Tampa's on there. We got Jacksonville. So really kind of like Sun Belt, even though Nashville, anyway, a lot of cool places to live where they're not having trouble. Now, Atlanta may be an exception to that rule. This is the one that I like right here, though. The domestic migration from a couple of the major states. Look at what's happening in California. There is a loss of people, and they're moving to Arizona or New Mexico, Texas, Florida, and in this coastal area right here, this mid-Atlantic, I guess is what that would be. But one of the things in Texas and why this is good for Texans and why people are moving here is because they like our state. They like our politics. They like our cost of living. They like the fact that we've got a lot of space to move into and the price of our homes. And to them, particularly if they're coming from California or New York or something like that, we look super cheap to them. And that's what's going to keep our state growing. Now, I'm not sure it's a positive thing that is growing with people from California or New York. And no offense to anybody that's out there listening that's from California or New York or Virginia. But Texans seem to have a attitude towards compliance that is a little different than other states. Joe, I'm going to leave it wide open for you to contradict me there.
I won't hold it against you if you're from California or New York. If you want to buy a home, I'll help you buy it.
You're a mercenary.
I love it. You know what? Actually, in the last 2 years, let me think now. I think I've sold 3 or 4 homes to Californians. And you know what's also I'm encountering a lot of is Canadians that want to move down to Texas lately.
Well, I also have done a lot of business with people out of state, including California and other places. And I found them all just they're Texans at heart. They've been wanting to come home, and or they've seen what we do here, and they say, look, I like what you guys are doing. So come on, man. I mean, we love you guys, and just don't bring that California politics with you or the Virginia politics with you, because it doesn't go down here. The people don't like that. So just a warning. No, it's not a warning. It's just a comment. That's all it is. So, but anyway, this is very good. And the point is, and Dave Ramsey said this, it's a good time to sell right now, particularly if you have a place to go. If you have, or if you've got time, and the market will soften because interest rates, unfortunately, what interest rates have done is they put pressure on some people, and some people cannot move above where they are now. They may just have to wait a while, and hopefully interest rates, if I'm putting quotes here, if there is a recession, some people think there is. I think that's news that's going to come out this week, as a matter of fact. This should be good for interest rates. So this is one of those unusual recessions because employment is still good, and the inflation is the thing that's kind of getting us right now. So not to say that I am any kind of expert on economics or anything like that. I just know that it's harder for people to afford houses when the interest rates are about double what they were 3 or 4 months ago. And so, but on that other note, rates are historically low. 4 or 5%. I mean, rates got up to 6%. They've come back down. They're well into the 5s, and in some cases even lower than that. And this is not a bad time to buy a house. If you're selling a house, it's a great time to sell a house because we've just come off having 29 and 20% and 15%, and I mean it's a good time to sell right now too. Do you not agree, Joe?
Just remember, real estate is hyper local. So these numbers that we're saying out there,
I don't want you to go too far out on a limb.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest challenges, Mike. As a listing agent, one of the biggest challenges that we have is to convince the seller that our science and math behind the approach of putting the house on the market and our marketing approach is more correct than what they have in mind. Most specifically, the pricing model or the strategy of pricing. So that's where a good realtor comes into play, where they can pull the numbers, they can analyze the numbers, and they can share that data with the seller. But it is a great time to sell. It absolutely is. I have no differing opinions on that at all because I'm living it. I got 3 listings right now. Not a single one of those 3 listings lasted over 7 days.
Is that right?
And we, even though the locations were different, It is a matter of the approach to the market. You know, I signed a listing agreement with one, case in point, over off of Aldine Westfield and Cypress Wood. We had to wait a few days to put the house on market, take pictures, get the pre-listing inspection. And between that time, there was 5 extra homes that hit the market in that neighborhood.
Wow.
But we were priced well enough versus even those that came on the market to where we sold in 4 days, or we're in contract right now.
So do you think that or what's your cut on the season as we're going, as school getting ready to start here this next week, I think, or maybe, yeah, I think it's the first week of August. Is that going to affect the home buying part?
Historically, you'll see a kind of a cooling off, so to speak, in around November through January, February time period. There is some seasonality right after Thanksgiving. It kind of bumps up a little bit. But yeah, usually around Christmas time, between Christmas and New Year's, and then it'll start picking up a little bit until tax season, and then after tax season, end of school time period, boom, you're back up in the swing of things. But I've sold homes, Mike, in the dead of winter, and I've sold homes in the heat of summer. So again, it's just a matter of is there a need there, which we know there is, right, because of the inventory shortage. And then also, what is the condition of your home, which, again, when I list a home, I'm going to always suggest a pre-listing inspection so we know. And then it's the pricing strategy, understanding what the market is doing in that hyper-local area of putting the home on the market, and pricing it right so that you attract people to the home. Right.
Yeah. Well, I can't agree with you more about having professionals to work with, somebody that's been in the business, that understands the markets. And I mean, when Joe says hyper local, obviously you want to get somebody that knows that area. And a good realtor is worth a lot more than what you pay them. I can tell you that for sure. So
I love you, Mike. That's awesome. That's the best thing you could have said.
Well, I love you. But I do believe, it's something I have no doubt about, and I've seen it many times, just because you're in that market. Now, we'll share that obviously you want to get somebody that's got experience, and you want somebody that's got some smarts about them and is passionate about the business. I mean, those are the kind of things that separate the good from the great, and you always want to get a great realtor. So, but what I love about this slide is because I love Texas, and I love to see people coming here, and I particularly like it for the real estate part. It's good for real estate that more people are here. And there may be a day when I won't say that, but it's not today. All right, so fixed home mortgage, average, and medium home prices. So this is the thing with rates going up, and rates are going up, but what this chart says, let me see if I can figure out what it says. It's about, oops, I got a little bit too far ahead of me. And sometimes when I'm looking at this paper, I'm looking because I can't read the small print on the computer. But this talks about the way homes are going and the way interest rates are going. And so what's happened is rates went down. This blue line is interest rates. And you can see at one point in time, they were up almost to 18%. Well, I guess they were 18%. This was back in the 80s. And then as they have come down consistently to here, this was a perfect time to buy right now. It was right there, but they're up a little bit, and they're up in the 5% range, 4.5%, 5%, 5.5%, that kind of stuff. But houses are continuing to go up, and it's part of the reason that it's going to level out a little bit, because it's eliminated some people, but most people can still buy. And historically, if you look at this, I mean, this right in here, this is a pretty good bar. Most of this this is from 70, what is it? I think it's 78 on this chart. It's not the same chart I used before, but in 78, you can see that rates were higher than that then. It used to be, well, I've told this story, I won't tell it again, but rates are good. Okay, they're not as good as they were a couple months ago, but they're still really good. So it's a good time. All right. And again, I want to reiterate, I don't want to take anything away from who I consider my teacher is Dave Ramsey. And when Dave Ramsey says the housing market is not crashing, I believe him. And I will volunteer to say that also. Joe, finish this up, buddy.
I got a question for you, Mike.
Yeah.
So I was on an online forum earlier today, a bunch of realtors just yipping and yapping mostly, but there was a conversation about the Fed's decision, I guess, is it going into effect tonight or tomorrow, and what the increase on the rate would be that the Fed is going to put into play. How do you see that affecting, in the short term, any interest rates as they relate to mortgages?
So, okay, it's a good question, a little technical, but I'm going to tell you where we come from. So the Fed, when they raise the rates, it's usually already figured into mortgage interest rates prior to. The other thing is that mortgage rates are not affected by the Fed. The Fed affects short-term rates that banks use to trade money between themselves, right? What affects mortgage rates are the mortgage-backed securities and the purchasing and or selling of mortgage-backed securities. Now, what I've learned over the course of the last several months is when rates started going up, the United States used to be a consistent and heavy buyer of mortgage-backed securities. They quit doing that. When they quit doing that, rates went from 2.5 to 5.5. But now other countries are buying our mortgage-backed securities because they're a good investment. And so that's one of the things that we've seen is that the softening or the balancing of interest rates. So I'm inclined to believe that the information about them raising the Fed rate won't affect the mortgage rates at all tomorrow. I just don't think they will, particularly because there are other countries that are buying our mortgage-backed securities, and that is where our interest rates come from. Now, again, I am not an expert, and I feel pretty comfortable that what I'm saying is good, but shoot, tomorrow anything could happen. So
yeah, sure.
That's what I'll say. And it's just, the Fed action does have an effect, but it's when they're buying back or they're raising rates, they're still trying to reduce inflation, and inflation is the enemy of interest rates. So, it's good for interest rates when they're doing something about that. So anyway, that's all I got to say.
Well, you know what? That's a good lesson in your lock and shop product that you sell.
That's right.
So anybody that's listening, like Mike said, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
That's
so
right.
If you know what's happening today, lock it in.
Joe, I sure appreciate you being on today. Always good to see you, my friend. And again, if anybody has any questions, Joe, tell them how they can reach you.
346-224-4224. That's my cell phone number. I'll answer it day or night. If you have any questions in real estate sales or with real estate sales, or if you need anything in inspections, home inspections, just give me a holler.
And my name is Mike Durr, Kingwood Mortgage Guy. You can find me, if you go online, it's kingwoodmortgageguys.com. And of course, you can always call our office. And thank you if you're here, you saw this, tell your friends if you think the information was worthy. And we'd love to see you back here next week on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Joe.
All right, man. See ya.